So hi everyone, welcome. Thank you so much for coming to Envision Frederick County's first virtual speaking event. My name is Maya. I'm going to be moderating today's panel. I'm currently interning with Envision Frederick County, which is a nonprofit based in Frederick County with the mission of advancing a sustainable, resilient community through civic engagement. So today we're going to hear from four amazing young climate activists. We have Piper Gross, the hub coordinator of Sunrise Movement Frederick, Kate Wells, the communications lead for Sunrise Movement Frederick, and an activist with Fridays for Future Frederick. We have Elizabeth Sacktor, a leader of last September's School Strikes for Climate in Baltimore, and a member of Baltimore Youth Environmental Network, and Elly Ren, a member of Refuel Our Future, which is a fossil fuel divestment group at Johns Hopkins University. So after our conversation, we'll have some time to take questions from the audience using the Zoom Q&A function. So if you have any questions for the panelists throughout the webinar, you can go ahead and click the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen and send it in, and I can read out some of your questions at the end. So without further ado, let's hear from the panelists. So to start off, can each of you give us an intro of the mission of your group and the type of work you've been involved with? And let's start with Piper.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. This is awesome. So I am a part of Sunrise Movement, and Sunrise Movement is building an army of young people to create millions of good jobs and stop climate change in the process. As a movement, we're scared of what the climate crisis and injustice means for the people and places we love. Sunrise has a base of hubs scattered across the US, and Kate and I are a part of Sunrise Frederick, which is a hub local to Frederick County. Sunrise Frederick was founded in May, and with its 11 members, we fight the climate crisis because we know it is our moment to win climate justice and a Green New Deal. Sunrise Frederick started as a little strike circle with a group of 6 teenagers organizing a climate strike for Earth Day. We were ready to go, and then unfortunately COVID hit and we couldn't gather anymore. So we transitioned into a hub, which is a longer term group. As a young hub, we've planned many of different actions, all online, including phone banking, art actions, and trainings, and we have many more coming. We focus our action and work on furthering climate justice, supporting social justice, passing climate legislation, and helping our community. And I'll pass it off to Elizabeth.
Thank you. So my name is Elizabeth Sacktor. I'm from Baltimore City. And I originally got involved in climate justice through the organizing of Baltimore City's Youth Climate Strike back in September of this past year. And so basically I was working with a bunch of other students from public as well as private schools in Baltimore City and the Baltimore area. And we marched 6 miles from the top of Baltimore down to City Hall. And we had speakers as well as an open mic in order to allow young people from all over the city to express their thoughts on the climate crisis and their feelings and everything directly towards the legislature at City Hall. For that, we actually collaborated with the Sunrise branch in Baltimore in order to get sort of like first aid and security and safety needs and all of those sorts of things, and they were really helpful with that. But at that event, we were approached by some members of the mayor's office. And since then, we've been working with the Baltimore City's Office of Sustainability to form the Youth Environmental Network, which is basically a group of youth from all around Baltimore coming together to organize environmentally focused programming, events, actions, that sort of stuff. Right now, our goal is to organize events and opportunities for education as well as advocacy that connect youths in their communities, all while making climate activism and education a lot more accessible than it is today, given the fact that our education system right now is really not educating our young people on what the realities are. One of the goals of our group is to sort of fill that gap. We've recently been working with another group called United Workers, which is also based in Baltimore, and they focus specifically on environmental racism. And that manifests right now in their work to shut down Baltimore's incinerator. We have one of the highest rates of airborne illness deaths in the country, and a lot of that has to do with the incinerator. So for April, we had this big thing planned. We had gotten the mayor to declare the month of April as Climate Action Month, and we were going to be working with United Workers to do some events around the incinerator, as well as an arts showcase, some educational opportunities, some shows, all sorts of things. But with COVID and everything, that all kind of got hijacked. And since then, we've been trying to sort of reformat onto social media. So we've been sort of putting out educational resources about how to actively participate in the climate movement from home without having to have a lot of like resources or tools that might not be available to everyone. So we've been using social media to connect with people that way. And we're in the process now of figuring out how we can sort of move back into climate actions while staying safe. And I will pass it on to Elly.
Hey everyone, glad to be here. I'm Elly. I'm a rising junior at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. I'm an organizer with Refuel Our Future. Refuel Our Future is a student org at Hopkins fighting for climate justice and socially responsible investing. And we're demanding that our university divest our endowment from fossil fuel companies and that the money is reinvested in local and democratically controlled funds, such as community loan funds, for example. And divesting is simply the opposite of investing. And so divestment is a tactic that is not new. It was first used during apartheid when students demanded that universities sell off their support for corporations who were operating in South Africa. And it was successful. And so divestment is most importantly a powerful statement that rebukes the injustices and destruction fueled by a business or industry. And so we are calling on Hopkins to divest from fossil fuels in order to condone or to condemn the fossil fuel industry and no longer profit from it as well. And so in the past year, we've celebrated various wins in the divestment movement at other universities with events such as Divest Fest. We striked every Friday in solidarity with the global youth climate movement, and we called those Fossil-Free Fridays. We also joined a nationwide escalation in the spring on Fossil Fuel Divestment Day, which turned out over 50 campuses. And right now, we're currently supporting all efforts to stop the private police force at Johns Hopkins. And I'll pass it to Kate.
Hi, yeah, so I'm a part of Sunrise Frederick, but another organization I'm a part of is Fridays for Future Frederick. So Fridays for Future was, it's pretty well known because it was started by the very well-known activist Greta Thunberg. It's an international movement, and there's been little hubs popping up around the US. And Fridays for Future Frederick is the one that's based in Frederick County. It was started on December 6th by one of the activists, Elly Ren, who it was just her for the first day. It was just her, and then it started growing even more. And I think the most activists that we've probably had protesting is about 15 or 16. And we've been doing it we did do it for 15 weeks before we had to stop gathering because of COVID. Yeah.
So thank you all for those great introductions. Could you now tell us how you got inspired to get involved with climate activism and how you got started?
Yeah, so as I said, my name's Piper, and basically my whole life I've known about the climate crisis and some of the risks it posed. But it wasn't until a close friend suggested that I listen to some TED Talks by Greta Thunberg that everything changed. Listening to her speak about the true crisis and injustices we had created by consuming fossil fuels, I knew that I could not stand by and watch. I was terrified of what stepping up looked like because it was just some teen. How could I help, you know? Well, I wasn't sure how I would act, but I knew I had to. I had to take my fear and turn it into change. I joined strikes and protests like Fridays for Future here in Frederick and in DC. I protested in DC as well, trying to find my place in this evolving movement. Then one day I had the opportunity to march in person with Greta Thunberg before COVID. And at that march, I was surrounded by a huge thunderous crowd demanding climate change or demanding climate action. And as we marched, the crowd parted for a moment and I was standing right next to Greta Thunberg. It was crazy. But my first thought was, wow, she's so small. This teen that had spoken at the UN and inspired international climate strikes. And I could look over the top of her head, and I'm pretty short. In this moment, I knew that if I worked hard and followed my passion, I could make a difference. I needed to look past my fear to hope and action. After that, in that moment, seeing a huge hero of mine in real life and realizing that we're all just human, and if we put our best effort in, that's how we make change. I was on a Sunrise call, and on that call, it was a national call, they were asking young people to host strike circles and Green New Deal launch parties, where we would talk about the Green New Deal to a group of our friends and ask them to get involved. This meant stepping up and taking leadership in a new way for me. It meant actually being the person who was inviting others to take action. I was hella nervous, but I knew that I had to make a difference. I had to speak truth to power and to fight for climate justice. I decided to look past my fear and I signed up with butterflies in my stomach. And well, after a lot of hard work, struggle, laughter, messing up and trying again, all my friends and family support and joy and the activist community I became a part of and started to lead, I'm here with Sunrise Frederick. Yeah. And I guess I'll pass it off to Kate.
Yeah, so much like Piper, I've always been aware of the climate crisis and all that because my mom has always been very environmentally aware. And so she always made sure to make sure that me and my brother always knew about the threat that climate change posed. And so I'd always been aware, but you know, growing up, I became more enthralled with more social issues rather than climate issues, not really realizing that they were so intertwined. And so I was more focused on those things, and it wasn't until around 2017 when our current administration took office and they started stripping environmental regulations. And you know, around that same time, the United Nations released the report that we had 12 years to get everything in check before it was irreversible. And then it just really hit me that like an alarm went off in my head that like I had to do something. And so I started doing little things like you know, just being aware of my waste and how I could reduce it, and you know, my plastic usage, my water usage, everything like that. You know, I went vegan, you know, things in my personal life that I could change, but I wanted to do something more. And I wanted to get involved in activism, and I wasn't quite sure exactly where to start. And me and Piper have been friends for years, and when around the time that I was thinking all of this, she was getting involved with the Sunrise movement, and that's when she invited me to get involved in Sunrise Frederick, and then from there I got involved in Fridays for Future Frederick, and yeah. And I'll pass it on to Elizabeth.
I forgot to unmute myself. So unlike these two, I knew about the climate crisis, but I didn't really know about it. Like pretty much the extent of my knowledge for a long time was just like the rainforests are being chopped down and the ice caps are melting, and that was about it. And I had a lot more involvement when it came to sort of like social justice issues. I had a fair amount of organizing experience around like educational and social justice in Baltimore City. And I was almost like actively avoiding the whole topic of climate change because I was scared, and I knew that if I did teach myself and I did learn, then that I'd be forced to make like big changes in my life that I didn't want to have to make. There was also a part of me that was very sort of like intimidated by the whole like, or what I thought that the climate justice movement sort of looked like. I thought it was very much, to be completely honest, I thought it was sort of like an issue that like affluent white people took up because they didn't have something better to fight for. And I was like, if you want to fight for something, like you should be fighting for social justice issues. And then I learned more about what climate justice actually is. And I learned about the way that environmental racism and classism play into the crisis that we're facing right now. And I learned how completely wrong I was. And around that time, when I was educating myself, I was invited to participate in planning this action because the person who invited me knew that I had the organizing experiences from other causes. So I started working with this group of people who were all incredibly super motivated and educated on the like climate crisis and what needed to be done and the specifics and stuff. And like I said before, I was definitely sort of like behind. I think I was also kind of scared because I didn't really know too much of the science behind it, and I was a little bit worried that I might not be able to understand it, so I like wasn't even trying. But once I got involved in actually planning an action, I understood that it was oh, where did
I think she's having connection issues.
okay,
Hopefully
I'll
she'll
keep
come
going.
back.
But I realized at that moment how incredibly imperative it was that I educate myself and I do the work, especially as a white person, a person who has a fair amount of privilege, because to be completely honest, the climate crisis isn't going to affect me in the ways that it's going to affect people of color, in the ways it's going to affect low-income communities. And the fact that I was like intentionally ignoring that, I think definitely plays into my own privilege and the fact that I didn't want to address that. And I think especially with the movement that's going on right now with Black Lives Matter and more people like addressing their own internal racisms and actively trying to be anti-racist, a big portion of that, I think we have to address the climate crisis and the way that that sort of like interplays with a lot of social issues. And so that's what I've been doing since then with the Youth Environmental Network, of basically talking about those social issues and trying to combat that through advocacy and education in like low income communities to sort of make it easier for other people to learn and make that transition than it was for me, because it took me so long and like I had so many resources at my disposal. I really want to make it so that other people can become involved and it doesn't have to be an enormous process for them. And I will pass it on to Elly.
Cool. So I first got inspired in, I would say, high school when I was participating in this activity called Science Olympiad, and I usually took on events that were related to ecology and the earth sciences. And in these different events, I had to memorize and I'd be able to identify hundreds of different species of insects, herps, which are reptiles and amphibians, and invasive species. And through like my preparation, I was really awed by the biodiversity of our planet and felt the urge to speak out on its destruction. And another thing is that since my parents are from China, when I would go back to visit my extended family there, I would see construction everywhere, factories, even this like thin layer of dust that would settle everywhere. And so as I got older, I began to understand that like China was kind of going through its industrialization phase, and our dominant economic forces were driving up the demand for like material goods, but also harming our environment by constantly extracting from it. And so this extractivism also played a huge role in me understanding how, even though like in America, the Clean Water Act and our environmental conditions might be getting better, but in reality, we are kind of exporting all of that to the global south. And so I would say my first taste of activism was at the Atlanta March for Science in 2017. But I didn't really get involved until I got to college and was surrounded by a bunch of different grassroots organizing groups. And in my freshman year, I was able to see how intense and powerful organizing can be when there was a occupation of the administrative building, protesting the creation of a private police force, and we ended up occupying the building for 35 days. So there was a lot of drama and tension, but also a lot of like beautiful power that like manifested itself. Yeah.
Thank you all for those answers. My last question before we get into the Q&A is, what are some of the things you've personally gotten out of doing activism? So can we start with Piper? Do you think your Wi-Fi is gonna hold on?
Yeah, sorry about that. It's
No problem,
raining
it
here, so it's a little
happens.
cutting out. But yeah, what have I gotten out of activism? Oh, that's a good question. So I'm kind of new to activism, but I've already gotten so much and been taught so much. It's hard to pick what to talk about, but I think for me, one of the things I've gotten out of it would be the realization that true strength is understanding, even if something is hard and throws challenges at you, you have to continue and do your best no matter what. Activism pushes you out of your comfort zones, which encourages personal growth. And doing activism, I've changed so much. I've learned how to be confident when I'm speaking in front of other people. I've learned how to make sure people, organize and lead a team. And it's not easy to be an activist, but the reason I do it is because of the community and the empowerment you create and receive. You meet amazing people that have your morals and dreams. You inspire others to let their voices ring out. You make a difference, even no matter how small or large it is, and you fight injustice. And that's what really inspires me to go out and do activism. Yeah. And I'll pass it off to Kate.
Yeah, so for me, I feel like I've gotten a lot of things out of activism, and much like Piper, because we kind of started at the same time, I'm also very new to activism. But it's helped me a lot. It's made me more aware and in tune with what's happening in the world. It's made me realize my space and how I'm using it and privileges that I hold. It's just really made me aware of how everything and how all of our systems are connected, and how one injustice is usually very connected with another. And that's all very sad, but it's also very it pushes you to fight, and activism is a beautiful thing. It's made me feel like I have more purpose um, it's, yeah, it's just, it's very empowering in a lot of ways. And it's made me also more secure in my voice and in myself. And it's made me just feel better every day that I know that I'm doing something about the injustices that are occurring. So yeah, I'll pass it on to Elizabeth.
Thank you. I would say the biggest thing that's activism has given me is sort of less fear. I think, like I said before, I was sort of afraid to educate myself because I was worried that the truths would be like too much for me or something. But I think that, like what Kate said, knowing that like I'm actively doing something to change the situation makes me feel a lot more motivated to keep doing stuff, as well as more in control. Like I know that I can make a difference, and that my actions and my thoughts can have a change on other people's heart, other people's legislation. And having conversations with members of the Baltimore and Maryland state legislature, I've learned how much they really do appreciate when you sit down and you really do have a conversation with them. And I think that combined with being able to work in groups, I think teamwork is like a huge thing that I've gotten out of this whole process of like being able to come together as a group to demand change. I think that's really, really powerful. And I think that it makes you feel like you're not alone, like you're part of a community, you're part of a group. It's really great to feel like you're in a space in which everyone wants the same thing, everyone is there for the same reason, and it's really comforting. And it's also just, it's nice to know that I'm doing stuff and that I'm not just passively watching injustices happen. And I will pass it on to Elly.
Yeah, I definitely echo everything that's been said so far. I guess to add on with since I'm the only college student, I've gotten this like sense of fulfillment that I don't see in like all of my peers. Being at Hopkins, there's a lot of driven people, but there are also a lot of like pre-meds and like pre-law people. And you can definitely tell that, you know, they don't care about the Black Lives Matter movement. They don't care about other social justice issues. Yet they're in these, they're trying to get these professions that require them to care for people and care about all these different issues. And so I guess through activism, I've learned more about like my own theory of change and like what makes me happy, I guess. And yeah, it's definitely, made me more fulfilled.
Thank you so much for all of those thoughtful answers. We're getting all our audience questions now. So to start, we've gotten a couple questions about hope. So one question is, actively facing such a serious threat, how do you stay hopeful and motivated? Which like a few of you touched on this in your last answers, but it'd be great to talk about hope specifically.
I know for me, like seeing how many people are getting involved in this so quickly really gives me hope. Like I think that I've said many times that I really do appreciate like Gen Z, and I'm really grateful to be a part of this generation. And I think that a lot of generations say this, but I really do mean it when I say that I think that our generation is so incredibly motivated and so willing to see the truth in things. I think that people want to see where the problems are and they want to fix things. And just seeing how motivated my peers can get when you give them a good cause gives me so much hope. Like I think that if we can mobilize this generation effectively, like we could get a lot done.
I just have to add to that, like, I definitely agree, seeing like other people really, it motivates me as well. And I think because this is such a global threat, that focusing on like some of the small goals just in your community or in your friend group is so important. Like for the hub that I'm a part of, we made 90 calls to representatives in our area. And that was something that really motivated me, that I saw that was just a small goal that we found. So finding those small goals and really focusing on them can really give you motivation and stay hopeful. Yeah.
I guess to add, there's this thing called the butterfly effect, which I'll just explain in case someone doesn't know what it is like this example of like a butterfly flapping its wings, and like generating this like small push of wind that might like develop into a hurricane somewhere. And so I definitely believe in that and see that we can see that throughout history. And so like even if like for example at one of our meetings like only a few people show up, like I won't feel too like down about it, like because the people who show up might be super passionate and like go on to do like amazing things.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's also like the community, the entire energy of everybody that gets involved is amazing. And just seeing how, like with the butterfly effect, like if I talk about it with a lot of passion, friends around me that were previously not really aware or not really super passionate about it, then do become passionate about it. And I think that's really important and really hopeful.
Thank you. So we also have a question about the connection between climate injustice and other social injustices, which a bunch of you touched on. So do any of you want to talk more about that? And also, do you have any recommendations about how people can further educate themselves about these kind of connections? Oh, Elizabeth, you're muted.
I do this every time. I will never learn. I personally have a recommendation, and this is a reading recommendation, not just for this topic, but a lot of the topics we've been touching on. It's Extinction Rebellions, This Is Not a Drill book. It's like a great handbook for like effective organization and activism, and sort of like how to get started in your community, but it also talks a lot about the nuances of climate justice and how it sort of interacts with social justice and how, I mean, it really interacts with all the aspects of our life. I know in Baltimore, I've definitely seen that in coming in contact with the United Workers Group. And their big, like I said before, their big thing right now is addressing the incinerator in Baltimore. It's in an area called Curtis Bay, which is in southern Baltimore. Baltimore is, anyone didn't know, still one of the most segregated cities in the country. And the area, Curtis Bay, about 40% of the residents there live in poverty. And it's really not a coincidence that this incinerator, which is causing this area to be like it is ranked first in the entire country for quantity of toxic air pollutants, that this area is also predominantly low income, predominantly Black and brown. This is the largest polluter in Maryland, and it just so happens to be in an area where it will most directly affect people of color and people of low income backgrounds. And I think that because of that, it makes it really easy to sort of ignore the whole issue if it doesn't affect you. And I think that, like I mentioned before, with this sort of like cultural reckoning that's going on right now, and a lot of people starting to recognize the privileges that they have in being able to not know about stuff, because it is a privilege to be able to ignore information. This idea that like it's climate injustice is happening now. It's not like the climate crisis is something that's going to happen in 20 years. It's happening right now. It's just not affecting you because you live in an affluent neighborhood or an area that, you know, doesn't have an incinerator. And so I think that once you sort of start to see those connections, it becomes really clear how climate injustice sort of is a form of social justice, in my opinion.
Yeah, all social justice issues are just inherently connected. If you think about it, the same systems of white supremacy, racism, ableism, speciesism, the list goes on. These systems all relate to the domination of some groups of people over another groups of people or beings, I guess. And that extends to the domination of nature. And so in terms of resources, all you have to do is like Google intersectionality, intersectional environmentalism. There's been a lot recently. And I would say like I've learned about it just like through all different kinds of avenues like that shaped my understanding. A lot of like Instagram posts and like just like Facebook statuses, even beyond just books, which are great too.
Someone asked, what is an incinerator? Do you care to explain?
Yeah, so an incinerator is basically, at least in Baltimore City, it is like the main form of waste management. And it basically means you put, whoops, I whacked something over there. You put all of your waste, all your trash and garbage and stuff into a spot, and then you, like the name suggests, incinerate it in order to get rid of it. And that means that a lot of the materials that are in that become airborne and are then released into your air supply. And so the neighborhood, say, around an incinerator, as well as, and this, like what Elly was saying with like the butterfly effect, it really does spread. And at least the incinerator in Baltimore, the Curtis Bay one, is the largest polluter in all of Maryland. So it really does, it's not, so it's going to affect, so for example, the Curtis Bay area immediately in the air quality there becoming incredibly toxic, but it does spread out and it does affect surrounding areas.
So we got a question from a teacher of an elementary school who has her 4th and 5th grade students watching right now. So hi kids. So she wants to know what advice we can give these students. Oh, they have an initiative at their school which has spread throughout other schools within the country. So what advice can you give these young students who have great ideas but may struggle if other adults don't listen to them?
Keep talking to them.
Yeah.
Keep talking till they listen.
Honestly, yeah, keep leading by example. Like, even though you're young, that doesn't mean that you can't lead by example. Continue talking with open mind and open communication. Yeah, just try to make them understand. Keep doing what you're doing. It's gonna work. Yeah.
Ask for a megaphone for your birthday.
Yeah.
So more people can hear you. We got a megaphone like when Trump was elected.
Yeah. And I mean, throughout history, young people, no matter how young or how old, are the ones who make change. We have the ability and the know-how to speak truth to power. We know that when we see an injustice, we speak on it because we're not affected by societal norms or oppression as much yet. So be grounded in your power. Know that yes, you're a kid, but that doesn't matter because in some ways kids are the most powerful because they can truly speak truth and take action in that.
Yeah, in our fossil fuel divestment campaign, usually it's like the administrators of the school who don't want to listen, who think like it's not going to do anything, or who just don't think it's a good idea. And so like, I mean, I guess at first it's hard, but you just have to build support. That could look like showing them what your friends are doing, or for us, it would be like showing them what other universities are doing. And so like as time goes on, things will change as well, and they'll kind of realize that you were right all along.
Somebody asked, what are you doing now during coronavirus, and what will you plan in the future when COVID-19 is over?
So I can speak for Sunrise Frederick in that we are currently, right now, planning an action for Juneteenth through June 22nd, 4 days of action, where we're going to, on Juneteenth, we're going to join protests in person in Frederick for Black Lives Matter. And then on the 20th, we're going to phone bank for a candidate in New York, Jamal Bowman, who is on a platform of healthcare for all, the Green New Deal, and defunding the police, and increasing education and supporting our education system. And then on the 21st, we are going to donate and sign petitions. And then on the 22nd, we're going to call county council members to get a climate emergency resolution in our county, Frederick County, passed. So lots of online actions like phone banking and making art and that kind of thing. And then in the future, we have a banner drop where we're going to go into Frederick and drop banners planned. So just being creative is really important when in this time. So using, what we have, which is social media and Zoom and those kinds of things, and taking what we know how to do, which is organize and get people empowered, and putting that into creative solutions. So, yeah.
I know for our group, we've definitely been using a lot of social media. We did for about a week. Each one of us sort of had like an Instagram takeover. And for the day, we showed sort of like a day in quarantine for each one of us. And each one of us showed different ways to sort of like get involved and stay motivated and do simple things that can really affect like small change in your everyday life. So we had sort of like how to like use your old trash, sort of like empty plastic bottle bottoms or like yogurt cups or stuff like that, and turn those into like small planters, how to get the seeds from your old fruit and stuff, as well as sort of like how to call your representatives, how to write a letter to your mayor or your local council person, all of that sort of stuff. And in the process right now, we are making a zine that hopefully we can publish now or in the future when COVID is less prominent.
For us, we're posting a lot on social media and doing political education, which is really important because you're kind of like you're absorbing people into the movement. And so once you have all those people, then you can like have really powerful direct actions, which hopefully we can like really go all out on after like social distancing measures are like completely over. But like individually, we've been like attending our local protests for Black Lives. And this Friday's Juneteenth, it's a huge day celebrating the Emancipation Proclamation. And so there are like tons of events for that too.
We have a couple more questions about inspiration, like what are your favorite climate movies, which is also education and inspiration, and if you have any other heroes besides Greta.
Aside from Greta, I want to just say that sort of all of the First Nations and Indigenous communities from around the United States, as well as Canada and Southern and Latin America, I mean, they've been fighting this fight from the beginning. And I think that this also sort of ties into the racism of the fact that They've been saying this was an issue, and they've also been proposing solutions on how to fix this for a really, really long time. And I think that one of the reasons why they haven't been paid attention to or given the respect they deserve, I mean, it is racism, as well as just the way that our government treats Native people in this country. It's absolutely abysmal. So even if they really wanted to get something started, the resources are so few and far between. So whenever I am sort of like looking for new people to follow or to get involved with, I'm definitely always trying to highlight Indigenous voices because they've been at this longer than any of us.
For me, another hero that I have would be Jamie Margolin, who is a climate activist and the founder, I guess, of Zero Hour. And she's really a powerful speaker and a powerful motivator. And she recently released a book, which is really inspiring. Yes, and I would just like to come back to Elizabeth's point about how, Indigenous peoples have been fighting this fight for longer than for centuries, and their voices must be heard. So
I wouldn't say I have like one particular person that I look up to. I really look up to like my fellow organizers and the people who just like are really passionate and dedicated to the cause. I find that like fame kind of affects activists, and so like I really look at them with a critical eye, especially when they start doing like paid promotions, like advertising stuff. And so like I try not to like just like idolize people like that.
I will say, in meeting all of you guys, I am super inspired by all of you, and y'all are doing really great work. So shout out to the other people on this panel.
Yeah, same to you.
Yes, same to everybody on here. Yeah. I also don't find specific heroes. I also like find inspiration from all of the people around me in activism. An actress that I do look up to and have been listening to a lot of her speeches and reading a lot of her writings recently, who's not necessarily a climate activist, but Angela Davis. I love her so much. And a film about the climate crisis that I really enjoyed was Cowspiracy, which is on Netflix. So if you ever want to watch that. Yeah.
Someone asked if any of you are running for office yet or interested.
I was voted most likely to run for president as my senior superlative, but I haven't started that yet, so I'll let you guys know.
I have to say that. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say that I'm a little too young right now, but maybe in the future.
Yeah, same for me. I've thought about it. And my major might be political science and all that. So I've thought about it, but yeah, I'm not completely decided yet. So.
I haven't been checking off the answers as I go, so now I'm like trying to find an answer we haven't answered yet, but we're almost out of time. So maybe just one more question, if I can find one. How about, why do you think it's important for young people specifically to get involved in activism?
I think this comes back to the thing that we were talking about with that one teacher with your elementary school students who hopefully is still here, of basically youth voices already being undervalued in the first place. And I think specifically when it comes to issues like the climate crisis, like this is our future and the repercussions from the choices that we make today are going to affect us the longest, and we're going to have to deal with cleaning that mess up. So I think that if anyone should be leading this movement, it should be the youths, because we're going to have to be on this planet the longest.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, Elizabeth. And the other part of it is that we weren't here to create this. So it's our time to demand that the generation in power right now, which is not really us yet, that they take responsibility and actually take action and start reversing the disastrous things that they have caused already. That we know that if we continue on this path, we're not going to have an Earth like the past generations. And so many people my age and the age of the panelists here are realizing this now and coming to this realization that if we don't make the government and the people around us change, then we're not going to have a place to be in this world. And we need to fight for that. So that's why it's important for young people to be involved.
Yeah, young people need to be at the table because, I mean, for most of history, it's like the old people who run things, and there's like so many differences. Like I remember hearing the Senate hearing with Mark Zuckerberg and like them trying to figure out Facebook, and they could not understand like simple digital infrastructure and like what an app was. And so like I feel like my generation is, or yeah, our generation is super smart about like just like using technology and like the tools that we grew up with, and like we can kind of circumvent different things like that, yeah, otherwise like other generations find problems with.
Yeah, definitely. Echoing what everybody said. You know, this is our future. This is going to affect us the longest and the hardest. And yeah, we really need to be in this fight for sure.
Thank you. So we're just about out of time. So I'm going to start wrapping things up. Thank you all for your questions from the audience. Sorry if I missed any of your questions, but they're all very appreciated. So I'm just going to give each panelist some time to do any plugs and tell us all exactly how we can get involved in the amazing work they're doing.
Cool. Well, I can go ahead and talk about a little bit of what Sunrise is doing right now. So as I talked a little bit earlier, we're planning 4 days of action from Juneteenth, which is June 19th to June 22nd, where we will be calling calling county council members in Frederick County. We will be phone banking for Jamal Bowman, who is a candidate in New York. We're going to be protesting in person in Frederick with masks and everything. And we are going to be signing and donating for Black Lives Matter. So if you're interested in joining that, I will drop a sign up link in the chat in a second. And then also in July, we have an amazing banner drop that's in the process of being planned. So if you're interested in being involved with that, there is also a link that I will drop. There we go. Okay, I think that's it.
And then for my organization, Youth Environmental Network, our Instagram handle, which is normally where we post most of our updates, if we're planning anything, if we're releasing any new information, is just Yen Baltimore. I guess I will also put that in the chat. And we're also on Facebook if you want to like our page, which is, I think, just Youth Environmental Network. Our little symbol is a green ginkgo leaf, if you're looking for us. And I would love to, if you are at all interested in getting involved in helping out, feel free to DM us or message us on either of those platforms. We would be happy to talk to you.
For Refuel Our Future, definitely following us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Our handle is just at Refuel Our Future, which I'll put in the chat. And also consider reaching out to your alma mater and asking them to divest from different things, whether that be fossil fuels, prisons, and yeah, especially if they are like calling you asking for donations. Also, you can divest your bank by not banking with like the major bankers and moving your money to a local credit union. Yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'll put my email in the chat too. And I'm also interning for this community solar program, solar company that is trying to get people in Frederick actually to sign up for community solar. So if you're interested in that, definitely email me. Everything's digital. You don't need to install solar panels on your house, and you get to save money.
Awesome.
Okay, great.
Oh.
Okay, so for Sunrise Frederick as well, I'm also just gonna drop our Instagram handle right here. And our Facebook is the same, it's Sunrise Movement Frederick. For Fridays for Future Frederick, we are still not sure when we're starting up again. We should be figuring that out soon, but I'm just gonna drop that Instagram as well. Yeah. Okay, great.
Awesome. Very exciting stuff. So thank you so much for our panelists, we have a bunch of audience Q&A that says you're amazing and inspiring. So I'm sure the audience says thank you as well. And thank you everyone for coming. Envision Frederick County is going to be having more of these kind of online events. So make sure to like us on Facebook as well and stay tuned for more of this kind of programming. And that's all. I'm gonna keep the call open for another few minutes so you don't lose all this great information that's in the chat, but that concludes our panel. So thank you.